Hi, it's Lauren, and welcome back to my craft room. I'm here for week 2 of the Slider Interactive Element of the Month, and this time I am featuring also the brand new Whimsy Stamps Build a Fairy Garden die set. It's this really awesome die set that even comes with a slimline, grassy kind of hill border die. It's a really nice set. And I paired it, as you can see, to make this slider card where we have our fairy sliding here. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you try it out for yourself. Here is a look at the die set. There's so many pieces to make cute mushrooms, grass, fairy, and even some little pixie dust. So I've cut out a rectangle piece measured to 4 by 5 1/4, so it's a little smaller than an A2 size, and I've die cut a grassy border and mushrooms and fairies, and we are going to be using Distress Oxide to add color to our white cardstock. So I'm starting with Tumbled glass, and I'm adding a kind of ombre effect. So I'm going with tumbled glass, and then I'm going to go in with blueprint sketch and darken it up, and then blend them together to kind of create this dark to light fade of my sky background. And then I make a really dumb mistake. Ugh. I didn't clean my glass mat, and I got dark blue where I didn't want there to be dark blue. So I'm starting again, and I'm going to clean my glass mat, and then I'm going to bring back in that dark, and I'm going to be also a little bit like lighter handed, so it's not quite as dark. And I'm creating that nice little blend between my light blue and my dark blue. I'm using my grass to make sure that there's enough dark blue showing that I want, and I'm happy, so I'm going to move on. For my grass, I am using bundled sage as my light color, and I'm just going to blend that in, leaving a little bit of white. And then I'm going to bring out rustic wilderness, and I'm going to darken it up to create that same ombre effect like I did for my sky background. I'm happy with it, cleaning up my mat, and I'm going to move on to my mushrooms. So I'm starting with my mushroom caps. I'm using Candied apple as my lighter or brighter color, and I am going to color in my 3 mushroom caps. Now this mushroom cap is really small, so I'm going to use just a piercer to hold that in place. Still trying to create that kind of ombre effect, so a little bit darker on the bottom of the mushroom cap and a little lighter on the top. And you can see that really well here on this larger mushroom cap. And for the darker color, I'm bringing out Fired Brick, and I'm just going to add a little bit to the bottoms of my mushroom caps. And after all those are done, I'm going to move on to the bottoms of my mushrooms, or the stalks, and then underneath the mushroom as well. So I'm using tea dye, and I'm coloring this piece that will be the inside or underneath the cap of the mushroom. And then I'm also going to color in all of the stalks. So again, going in with an ombre look and not going all the way to the top edge. And then for the mushroom caps underneath the red, I went the other way, so it's a little bit darker on top and lighter on the bottom. And to darken it up for that ombre effects for my second color, I used frayed burlap. Now for my fairies, I am bringing out pumice stone, and I am going to color my fairies gray. I tried to do a bit of an ombre effect on these as well, but they turned out looking mostly gray, which is good because, you know, they are, as you can tell, I'm going for kind of more of a softer look on this card. So that way you can still see the fairies on the card, but they still match the kind of color scheme and feel. I'm trying to create this light and airy look to my images. So now that all my distressing and coloring is done, we're going to work on the mechanism. I am using the Kinetic dies from Whimsy Stamps. I have the no-see Kinetic dies as well as the straight line to make my sliders, and I will have everything linked down below. So these are 2 different die sets I'm using for this card. So I'm working on my little slider pathway here, figuring out which one is the best, and I cut the smallest of the straight lines, and then I also cut out the mechanism and circles to actually be inside of the slider track. So there isn't a little notch die, so I'm just going to kind of do my own here using the mechanism piece. So I am trying to line it up so I know where my notch will be, so it'll be, you know, pretty even to the center of my pull tab piece. So I am taping my paper down and using my grid on my glass mat to keep everything straight. I'm lining up the die where I want to create my notch and then taping it down to make sure it stays in place while I run it through my die cut machine. So now you can see I have a little notch in my green grass, and that way the card receiver can actually pull out the pull tab without it sticking too far outside of the card. So now I'm going to work on the sliding mechanism. I am putting 2 small foam dimensionals onto one circle, placing it inside the track, and then closing it up with the other circle, making sure everything is moving properly. And I want my pull tab to be towards the end, right, because I just cut that notch. So I am making sure it will fit where I want it to. I'm putting wet glue onto the circle that I'm going to be attaching the pull tab to. And to make sure my pull tab stays centered to my grass, I'm just using a little bit of mint tape. So now I am placing it on to that circle, and only my pull tab piece will adhere. So now that it's stuck on there, I want to make sure it doesn't get all flimsy and move around. So I am using some foam tape, and I'm just going to trap my pull tab in the track. And I'm creating another kind of track for my pull tab to go, just to make sure it doesn't move around too much. I want it to be snug enough that it's not wobbly, but not too snug that I can't actually move the mechanism. So now that I am happy with that, I am going to cut off the excess of the pull tab and add a bunch of foam. I want to make sure I'm not adding any foam to obstruct my pull tab. So make sure you move it all the way to the left when applying any foam to the left of the track, and all the way to the right when applying foam tape to the right of the track. So you want to make sure that everything is secure and it won't get stuck. So now I am going to put on a piece of really thin acetate. I cut this down to 1/4 inch wide, and I left it long because I'm not really sure where my fairy is going to go yet. And I put on some strong sticky tape onto my moving slider piece and attached my acetate. So now I'm going to close it all up, peel off all that release paper, and adhere that grass down. And I'm going to pull my mechanism. It's sliding where I want it to, and just my acetate piece is moving. Now I found it kind of difficult for me to pull the tab. I kind of wish I did a notch in both the green grass and the blue. So if you duplicate this card, I would definitely cut notches in both so it's easier for the card receiver to pull on that pull tab. But I'll show you how I kind of fix that in a little bit. So now that my mechanism is all done and my card base is kind of ready, and I don't have it onto an A2 card base yet, but my background is ready, I am going to glue together all of my mushrooms. So I'm glued all my pieces together for this large mushroom. I love it. I love the colors I picked. It makes me so happy seeing this cute little kind of pastel-esque mushroom. And I'm going to glue my cap onto my medium-sized mushroom and then my cap onto my small mushroom. And I just love them so much. I'm probably going to do this again. So now I am figuring out where my large mushroom is going to be. I need to apply foam to anywhere the mushroom is going to be adhered to my blue sky background, and then wet glue on top of the green grass so that way it is flush. I stick that down, and I'm going to put this little fairy on top of the mushroom. So I am going to do a little bit of foam again to anywhere that's going to stick to my blue background, and then wet glue where it will stick to the mushroom so everything is flush. So now I am going to place my other mushrooms. My medium one will go here to the bottom left of the large mushroom. And this time I want it to pop up even a little bit more. I know I'm doing a lot of foam here. It's a very thick card. So I'm using these really thin dimensionals that I use for my sliding mechanism and just popping both the medium and the small mushroom up. It's not too much thicker. They're actually pretty darn thin. I'm going to adhere my fairy that's laying down on her stomach directly onto the grass using some wet glue. And then I am playing with my flying fairy to see how I want to place her onto that piece of acetate so it looks like she's just flying on without anything attached. So I'm using some strong sticky tape, and I adhered her where I wanted to put her on the acetate and trimmed off any excess. I'm playing with her and I really like how she looks, so I am going to move on. Now I realized that I used my distress oxides and everything, and then I didn't even do any splatter. Who am I? So I decided to get out some sparkle. This is Lawn Fawn liquid stardust, and I covered up the acetate because I didn't want any splatter to get on the acetate, and then I smear it. I mean, we all know what happened earlier. It was smearing. So I blocked the acetate, sprinkled a bunch of liquid stardust, and then set it to dry. I lifted up my fairy using my scissors just to make sure that she wasn't covering any splatter that needed to dry. So now that everything is done, we're going to adhere this whole background and mechanism to my card base. I'm applying foam everywhere, again making sure not to have any foam that can affect my sliding mechanism. And I adhered her to an A2 card base, a top folding horizontal card. I finished everything up and I was like, wait a minute, I don't have any room for a sentiment. So I needed to lower my fairy a bit. So I pulled her off, put some new tape on, and adhered her a little bit lower and trimmed off the excess acetate. And now I'm going to attempt to fix my pull tab a bit. So I am taking a piece of foam and just kind of shoving it under there and creating a stopper. So my sliding mechanism piece can't go all the way down in the track as I had originally set it up to be. So I added a little bit of stopper by adding some foam in there, and it blocked the end of the track. So as you can see, it does stick out a little bit to the left now, and it will be much easier to grab. I have a quick strip die cut out of some white cardstock, and I am using the Simple Sentiments to stamp especially for you in VersaFine Clair Twilight. It's a beautiful blue ink, and I stamped that sentiment, adhered it down, and trimmed off anything that was towards the left of my blue distressed background. Now I can't finish a card without adding a little bit of bling, so I'm bringing out my Clearly in Love Sparkle Blends, which is my favorite right now. Everything has a holographic, iridescent look to it. And I'm just going to pick out some random shiny sequins and pieces to put on my card. There are these really cute 4 pointed stars that I put around the fairy's wands or hands, and some very shiny little sequins around my fairy sitting on the mushroom, just to give a magical look to my fairies. So I'm using my jewel picker and my wet glue, picking them up and applying glue and adhering all of those sequins down. And that will be the last finishing touches to my card. I really think this is fun. It's a little bit different than what I normally do. I use a lot of black lined critters and do watercoloring or alcohol marker coloring. So this was really fun to create a more soft and magical looking card. Here's a final look. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you try it out for yourself. If you're new here, thanks so much for stopping by. Please hit subscribe and like if you enjoyed this video, and have a wonderful day.